Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Like, Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hi, this is Joe from Vanta. In today's digital world, compliance regulations are changing constantly, and earning customer trust has never mattered more. Vanta helps companies get compliant fast and stay secure with the most advanced AI, automation, and continuous monitoring out there. So whether you're a startup going for your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a growing enterprise managing vendor risk, Vanta makes it quick, easy, and scalable. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. Get started at vanta.com.
I'm Clare Pooley, and this is Sober Awkward.
The kettle's boiled, Vic.
Great. Perfect timing. Just a dash of milk for me, please, mate.
Here you go. Shall we get started then?
Have you ever woken up on a Sunday morning and said, I'm never drinking again, and then found yourself waving $50 at a barman by happy hour?
Are you wondering why everyone else can stop at 1 while you head to a dodgy after-party with a weird bloke called Disco Dave? If so, it might be time to take a deeper look at your relationship with your reliable social crutch, alcohol.
On each episode, we'll investigate our own dysfunctional dealings with booze and find out if it's possible to stop this deeply ingrained habit before things get too messy.
Yep, we're going to open up a shame shed of humiliating drinking stories to help you understand why waking up from a booze coma each weekend with a kebab sticking out of your top pocket might actually be negatively impacting your health.
Hamish and I are here to delve into what it's like being sober, an unwanted warts and all look into why giving up those cheeky pints or putting down those mummy wines will make you feel happier, help your anxiety and mental health, and turn you into the most sparkly, authentic version of you.
Won't that mean I become boring though, Vic?
Well, Hamish, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm Victoria Vanstone.
I'm Hamish Adams-Cairns.
And this is Sober Awkward.
Clare Pooley is a blogger, a speaker, a wife, a dog mum, a human mum, and in the eyes of many a sober person, the author of the book that helped them kick the booze, The Sober Diaries. Like many of our listeners, Clare has an all-or-nothing personality, and her drinking became more extreme with the stresses of parenthood. As her wine o'clock habit began to get out of control, she took action and has now been sober since March of 2015. That's over 10 years this year, Clare. She began sharing her sobriety experiences in a blog called Mummy Was a Secret Drinker, which she wrote under the pseudonym Sober Mummy. The popularity of the blog, with over 1 million hits in its first year, inspired her to come out, so to speak, and write the Sober Diaries to critical acclaim. Clare's sobriety journey has been far from straightforward, and she is today a wonderful example and representation of what we can achieve and overcome without alcohol. Welcome to the Sober Awkward podcast, Clare.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to chatting.
Of course. You know what, Clare, what I particularly love about your story and the way that you write, and I mean this in the best possible way, is its normality. Like, it is so easy to consume. It is so relatable. You know, a lot of the people that I get on this podcast have had these terrible childhood traumas, or they've hit this sort of devastating rock bottom and it sparked the change. And that just isn't really your story. And I actually think it isn't the story of most of the people that listen to this podcast. And we're always trying to fight to sort of normalize the fact that sobriety can be for anyone who wants it, you know, and we want to destigmatize this idea that you have to hit this horrible problem in your life and then you have to turn things around. So I want to sort of start by asking, what kind of a drinker were you before you were a parent? You know, so school and university, and then you worked in advertising for years and years and years. You know, were you different to your friends or your family or your colleagues at that point in your life?
Oh, that's a good question. Because, you know, I didn't think I was any different. And, you know, I read, when I first decided to quit drinking, I read loads of memoirs and I read so much stuff. And people talked about how from the very first drink they had, they knew that they were different and they were filling some hole or something. And that really wasn't me. I thought that I started drinking as a teenager, like most people did, and I enjoyed it, and it helped me relax, and it was great fun, but it wasn't out of control. It wasn't, I don't think, any different from anybody else. And my drinking ramped up when I went to university, but I think everybody's did. And it was back in the days where, I didn't know a single person that didn't drink. It was absolutely normal to drink a lot at university. And then I went into a job advertising, which was all about burning the candles at both ends. So, we had not just one bar in the office. We had two. We had one on the ground floor, which was for regular people, and then one on the sort of in the penthouse, which was for the directors. And I had this massive expense budget, and my part of my job was taking clients and creatives and whoever I wanted to really out for drinks and dinner and dancing and whatever they wanted to do. So I didn't feel like I was any different. I certainly drank a huge amount, but I really thought everyone else was too. And remember, those were the days of Bridget Jones and Sex and the
Hmm.
City and Absolutely Fabulous. And I felt like all these sort of feminist icons were drinking just the way that I was. And I kind of felt like it was my duty as a strong, emancipated woman to drink in the same way that the men did, to keep up with them. And I certainly did my best to do that.
Well, that was the culture in the 90s, wasn't it? It wasn't until I read your book and you listed those particular icons of the time that I reflected and was like, oh, yeah, they were all drinking by themselves at home,
And
and they
drinking
were
a
like,
lot.
yeah. And that was like cool. And like all of the, we both grew up both in England in the 90s. And like the coolest girls were the ones who were drinking with the boys. They were like the legends. They were on all the front pages of all the newspapers and magazines, and we thought that was it at the time. It sort of goes to show
Yeah,
how much of a shift
absolutely.
there's been.
And it was a big marketing thing as well. So, until the 90s, most drinking happened in pubs, which were quite sort of male dominated areas. And towards the end of the 80s and the 90s, they started opening all these wine bars. Like in the UK, it was things like Pitcher and Piano. And they did that deliberately to attract women. And they served wine in these really big glasses at 250 milliliters per serving, which is a third of a bottle. So if you went out and had 3 glasses of wine, which was easily done, that's a whole bottle of wine you're drinking. Yeah, and that was all absolutely normalized.
Well, so not only were you drinking a lot, given the industry, everyone that I know that's ever worked in advertising has got similar stories to you, but you're also working on advertising campaigns for wine. Remember, you had to design one that was
Yeah.
specifically targeted at women wine drinkers to make it look,
Yeah.
appealing and more expensive than it probably is worth.
I thought that was great. I thought, oh wow, my job and my favorite hobby have coincided. But now I look back and I feel really guilty. I was one of the people that was portraying drinking wine with your girlfriends as the way to relax and the way to be cool and sexy and emancipated and all of those things. And oh God, I feel awful about it.
So when did that sort of penny drop moment come when you thought, this is now something that needs to be addressed? Was that after you'd become a mum and sort of something changed or something shifted about the way that you were drinking? I heard you mention, there was a moment where you realised I'm no longer drinking to celebrate, I'm more drinking sort of for a variety of other reasons that are no longer there.
Yeah, I talk about how drinking can shift from sort of social being in a social situation always where it's sort of social lubrication to self-medication, and you find that somehow you've ended up drinking to with any emotion, so not just to celebrate but to commiserate because you're bored or lonely or tired or fed up or happy or celebrating, whatever, any emotion you sort of end up drinking with. And, that understanding really, took a long time. And for many years, I mean, probably about a decade, I realized I was drinking too much and I tried to cut down. And I'm sure so many of your listeners have been through this, where you set yourself all those rules and you say, well, I'm only going to drink at weekends, or I'm only going to drink when I go out, or I'm only going to drink beer because beer doesn't really count, or every other drink is going to be water, like that ever lasts for more than
yeah,
about half an hour. And, I would stick to those rules for about a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then I'd be right back to where I started. And that went on for at least a decade. So it certainly wasn't an overnight realization and then an immediate sort of, oh, I'm giving up. It was, the slow dawning that this was a problem, and one that I was finding difficult to solve.
At its most extreme, you were drinking up to 10 bottles a day. And I remember you've written about some of the
No, no,
effects of
no,
that.
no, 10 bottles
Sorry,
a
sorry,
week.
sorry. God, no, not 10 bottles a day, 10 bottles a week. I'm painting you in a much worse 10 bottles a week at its worst. You said that the effects of that was that you're having anxiety, you were an insomniac, you had no energy, you sort of generally felt like you were in a rut. It's something that so many people will relate to. Were you aware in that moment that it was the booze that was making you feel that way? Or were you rather looking at it like, alcohol is my way out of this? Alcohol can be the solution. I'm tired, so I'll drink. I'm feeling down, so I'll drink. Was it a reversal of sort of the facts?
Yeah, it wasn't really until after I gave up that I realized quite how many of my problems were caused by
Mhm.
alcohol. I was starting to realize that some of them were, but certainly not all of them. So, for instance, I was having real problems with anxiety, and I thought, oh God, I'm feeling stressed and anxious. I'll have a drink because that will help.
Mm.
And, as you all know, a drink does help temporarily, but it's really like pouring petrol on flames, in that over time alcohol makes anxiety and stress so much worse than it started. And I think so many people say this, but the thing I thought was my best friend was actually my worst enemy, sort of stabbing me secretly in the back
Mm.
while pretending to put an arm an arm around my shoulder. And that it took me a long time to realize that.
Well, speaking of worst enemies, you had a very loud and convincing wine witch voice on your. I picture her on your shoulder, or maybe it's sort of like hanging off your ear. Tell us about the wine witch. Yeah, when did she appear, and when did she become too much to deal with?
Oh, when people say to me, how do you know if you have a problem with alcohol? My answer isn't generally the obvious things like drinking vodka in the morning
Mhm.
or having major blackouts, because I never got to that stage. And I think a lot of people don't, thank goodness, ever get to that stage. I think the thing that shows that you have a real problem with alcohol and that you'd be better off without it is when so much of your headspace starts becoming about drinking.
Mm.
And I was really tired of thinking about drinking. And every day I would think, oh, am I going to drink today? What am I going to drink today? Have I got enough wine in the cupboard for today? Did I drink too much yesterday? Perhaps I should try not drinking today. And it would go round and round and round. Perhaps I should buy some more wine, but I can't go to the shop that I went to yesterday because they'll look at me and think, oh, she was in yesterday buying wine. Maybe she has a problem. And so on. I mean, it went on and on and on. And every time I tried to cut down, that voice just got louder and louder. And the voice is really deceptive as well, because it's the same voice that says, oh, you really deserve a drink. And you don't have a problem because you're not drinking vodka in the morning. So therefore, carry on. And, it's a help, and, you deserve it, and you work really hard. So, pour yourself a drink. I found that when I quit drinking and that voice became even more persistent, I found that the best way to think about it was to give it a separate personality. And it's a sort of Alan Carr idea. He
Mhm.
talks about, killing the snake. And I instead came up with a wine witch. And suddenly it became much easier, because if you believe that that voice in your head, the addictive voice, is you,
Yeah.
you feel like you are constantly fighting against yourself. And you feel that on one hand you're telling yourself, oh, I don't have a problem, I really deserve a drink. And on the other hand, you're saying, no, I do have a problem, I really shouldn't have a drink. And there's this internal battle which is exhausting. Now, the minute you say, that's not me, that's the wine witch, that is the evil person who has lodged in my subconscious. And the only way I can get rid of the wine witch is to deprive her of what she needs to survive, which is alcohol. And the longer I deprive her of alcohol, the weaker she will become. Then suddenly you're not battling yourself, you're battling somebody else. And that is so much easier. So call it whatever you want. You know, people talk about the monkey, they talk about the wolf, give it whatever personification you like. But remember, it is not you. It is the addictive voice in your head, which is evil and will only be stopped if you don't give it what it wants. And giving it a personality and picturing it and picturing yourself. You know, I used to picture myself, I was watching Game of Thrones when all this was going on. And I pictured myself as Daenerys, you know, mother of dragons. And I was there riding my dragon, sort of, you know, breathing fire on the wine witch. And, you know, I found that really helpful.
I love it. It's a good tip. It's a good tip. You know, it was one of the best moments of my sobriety was the day when I realized I was no longer consumed with thoughts of drinking. You argue that, you know, people give up for a month and congratulate themselves and find it really hard and then go back to drinking in, you know, normally February. But it takes longer to sort of divorce your mind from constantly thinking about it. The way I described it in a recent episode was when you're a drinker and someone invites you to a party out of town, if your first thought is the logistics rather than the excitement of the party, like, right, is there a hotel nearby? Can we stay the night there? Is there a late night taxi that we can get to and from so you don't have to drive? Like, if those are the thoughts going through your mind rather than like, amazing, I've been invited to a party by Claire, I can't wait to see Claire, you're going to take a little bit of undoing that thought process. And I think you argue it takes about 100 days. I think it did maybe take me at least 100 days to suddenly go like, I'm not even thinking about this anymore. It's not, you know, sunset is drinks, or Fridays drinks, or, you know, any stress or any celebration or any sporting event is suddenly first thought is drinks. It does take a while to undo that.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think it takes 100 days for things to start getting better. It takes 100 days before you start thinking, actually, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know that, you know, I can see all the benefits starting to appear and the downsides don't feel as awful. So I think that's about when it switches and you start thinking this is worth doing. In terms of totally getting rid of the voice in your head, that takes longer. That can take about 6 months to a year even. Because if you think about it, if you've spent, you know, 2 or 3 decades thinking about drinking and training your subconscious to expect to drink in all sorts of different situations, it takes quite a long time to untrain that. But it does happen. And you're right. For me, that was also the best thing, is when, you know, you suddenly realize that it feels like freedom. It feels like somebody has opened the doors to a cage and said, there you go, fly, you know. And you realize that you have all this space in your head that you can do other things with. And people who quit drinking go on to do really incredible things. You know, they find old passions that they'd left behind. They start new businesses. They start new relationships. I mean, you know, just having that space to think about other things and to do other things is really empowering and such a relief, to be honest.
I want to talk briefly about your final drink because it was such a cinematic moment according to your descriptions of it. So one of your rules was, I'm not going to drink before midday. And there was this particular day when you sort of accidentally, I guess, broke that rule, and that would turn out to be this turning point in your life. Can you tell us that story? Because it's such a it's almost funny in its tragedy to me, this story.
But again, it is very normal. You know, it wasn't like I read about so many people's sort of last drinks, and it usually involved being, you know, found on a park bench or in a gutter or something like that. And it wasn't that sort of moment, but it was a really big moment to me. And it's the first page of the Sober Diaries, because it was the morning after a birthday party, my birthday party. And my birthday party had started at lunchtime and had gone on until about 2 a.m. So I woke up on the Sunday feeling really awful. And the kids were in the kitchen. I had 3 children at the time, 6, 8, and 11. And they were making loads of noise. One was playing a clarinet, one was playing Minecraft, one was watching something loud on YouTube. I mean, it there was a real cacophony. It was perfectly normal for a Sunday morning, but I had this terrible banging headache, and I knew, because for a long time I got to the stage where I knew that the only thing that really made a hangover go away fast enough was another drink, hair of the dog.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this really hard and fast rule about not drinking before midday, because I'd done all of those, I'd Googled so many times, often drunk late at night, am I an alcoholic?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first questions that would come up is, do you drink in the morning? And I thought, no, I don't drink in the morning. Therefore, I am not an alcoholic. So I never drank before midday. And on that morning, it was about 11 in the morning, I think. And I opened the cupboard, and sadly, the cereal cupboard is the same as the alcohol cupboard, or was in my house. So I opened the cupboard, and there was this bottle of wine with about 2 inches left in the bottom, which I thought was like a sign, because I never left anything in the bottom of a bottle of wine once it was opened. And I poured the remnants of that bottle of wine into a mug, because I thought then the kids wouldn't see me drinking. And I drank it at 11 in the morning, and I did feel much better. But then I looked at the mug that I was holding, and it said on the mug, the world's best mum. And I felt really, really ashamed of myself. And that for me it was just where I felt, okay, this has gone too far. I can't do this anymore. And I wasn't excited about stopping drinking at that point. I just felt like I had no choice. I thought, I have spent enough of my life prioritizing myself, and it's time that I grew up and put other people first. And my life from now on is going to be utterly miserable, but that's my fault. And I've got to suck it up and deal with it. And that was how I felt. It wasn't okay, I'm giving up, I'm free, it's all going to be brilliant. It was like, oh shit, this is it.
January is just around the corner. And if the mere thought of everything you're going to drink in December makes your stomach churn,
then maybe this is the year you finally give sobriety a proper go. New year, new you. Sounds lovely, but where do you even start?
how about right here? Hamish and I have done the hard work so you don't have to. We've created the 30-day sobriety tour guide.
This isn't just another checklist, it's a daily video guide to keep you accountable, informed and genuinely entertained during the challenging first month.
We share the top tips and tricks that have kept us sober for years. You'll learn how to socialise sober without feeling awkward.
How much cash you'll actually save, and will absolutely reassure you that life without alcohol does not mean giving up sex.
I'm not so sure. Stop wondering how and start living. The 30-day sobriety tour guide is your fast track to a fantastic January.
Head over to soberawkward.com right now. You can pick up the entire guide for just 149 Aussie dollars, or whatever that amount is in your local currency.
That's soberawkward.com. Let us be your guides.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here, wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Most people focus on what they're giving up, not on what they will get from sobriety. I think that's pretty regular, isn't it? So you've made the decision, okay, today's the day I'm going to get sober. I've heard you speak about the fact that you sort of then got into sober content, you know, if it was books or podcasts or whatever it was. What other tools did you use? You know, I know that the term alcoholic never sat well with you. You prefer to use the term alcohol addict.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
what AA, it wasn't going to be AA. So what levers did you pull to help you get there?
Well, you know what? It was very different back then. It's amazing how much the world has changed. So this was 2015, and there weren't sober podcasts. There were memoirs about people who were really big drinkers and then quit. But the memoirs would end at the point where they quit, and it would say, and then I stopped drinking and everything was fine. And I think, hang on, how did you stop drinking? How long did it take? What did it feel
That's
like?
the interesting bit.
I sort of felt like they stopped at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were, there was the Alcoholics Anonymous big book, which I bought. And there were a few sort of how-to books like Alan Carr, which I bought, and Jason Vale. So, I bought all these books and I shoved them under my bed so nobody would see them. But the only sort of community I was aware of at the time for people who'd stopped drinking was Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't want to do Alcoholics Anonymous partly because I was scared and ashamed and embarrassed and all of those things. But also I was slightly worried that, like a lot of those memoirs, it would only convince me that I was okay. Because I thought, if I go to that sort of thing and there's lots of people there who had really, really big problems, I will think, oh, I didn't drink like that, therefore I'm okay. And I knew I wasn't okay. And I really wanted to find a community of what we would now call grey area drinkers. And back then, I didn't know of any communities like that. The only thing I found was the blogging community, which, like Alcoholics Anonymous, was very anonymous. There were a number of people who were writing blogs, because 2015 was in the day when blogging was still sort of quite big, under pseudonyms about quitting drinking. And I thought, I will do that. And it would be a bit like the diary that I used to write when I was a teenager. So I set up an anonymous blog, and I was really keen to make sure it was anonymous because I hadn't told anybody, I hadn't told any friends, I hadn't told any family, I hadn't even told my husband I was stopping drinking. And I called it Mummy Was a Secret Drinker. And it was really rudimentary because I didn't really know what I was doing. So, for the first 2 years, there were no pictures, for instance. It was just text. And I didn't publicize it because I didn't want anyone to know it was me. And I wrote in that blog every day. And that was, along with all the reading I was doing and all the internet research, that was my therapy. And through that blog, although I didn't publicize it, it sort of started going viral. It sort of more and more people found me, and more people started saying, yeah, I feel like that too. Yes, that's just like me. And, I found my community that way. And, Johann Hari says the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's what I discovered, is that the connection I had with those people through my blog was what got me through. And nowadays there are so many much easier ways to find that community. There are the podcasts like yours, there's Instagram, so many sober influencers on Instagram. There are people all over the place talking about the benefits of getting sober, which just didn't happen back then. So community was one of the big things. Alcohol-free beer was another one. I mean, people read the Sober Diaries and they say, were you sponsored by Beck's Blue? And it's like, no, they've never given me so much as one, free beer. And now I don't even drink Beck's Blue, actually, because it's, there are much, much better alcohol-free beers out there. But back then, it was the only alcohol-free adult drink that I could find. And it was like on the bottom level of the supermarket shelves, covered in dust. And you had to try really, really hard to find it. And that really helped me. I know some people find things like that triggering, but, for me, having something that tricked my brain into thinking it was having a grown-up drink really helped.
I was actually sober the whole of 2015, January 1st to January 1st, 2016, actually as a like a dare to raise money for a charity that I'd helped set up. And I think Beck's Blue, being as awful as it was one of the reasons I did not consider carrying on. I was like, is this it? Like, that's the only option. And it's kind of the same price as a normal Beck's. Like, they needed better options here.
Yeah, and now there are hundreds and hundreds
ones
of alcohol-free beers. And, I know most people I know who drink regular beer will also drink alcohol-free beer. It's completely changed. You can get it on tap, which is extraordinary. Lucky Saint, one of my new favorites. So many pubs in the UK have Lucky Saint on tap now.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny, the blog was interesting in that it seemed to snowball so quick. That you write about the first day or something, a notification pops up like, oh my God, somebody's read it. And then you realize that was just you having read your own post. over the next few years, think a million in the first year, and go up to 2, then 3 million. What do you think it was about your style of writing or your way of communicating that was reaching people? Because, like you say, there's plenty of blogs around in 2015. Why was your one that just clicked with people?
Oh, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's what you said at the beginning. I think it's just because it's relatable. And, I realized that, we can be incredibly different people from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, different situations, and different ages. And yet the process of quitting drinking is so similar. And, I just focused on all those little weird things that you do when you're drinking and the weird things that happen when you stop drinking. And I did it with humor, because the way I've always dealt with any difficult things is to laugh about them. And I think that just really helped people is firstly to think, oh, this isn't just me. I'm not the only one in the world who feels like that. And secondly, actually, it is quite funny.
A lot of it is funny.
Yeah, it may not be, it may have been really difficult and a real sort of disaster in many ways, but it's also quite funny. So, I'll give you an example. I remember talking about how when I mentioned this earlier, but when in my drinking days, I used to be paranoid about cashiers. So I always felt like cashiers were judging me, and that therefore I had to rotate the shops I bought my alcohol from so that I wouldn't be clocked by the cashier. And I'd find myself saying really stupid things, like I'd be with one of the kids and I'd put 3 bottles of wine on the trolley, and I'd say, oh, Godfather Duncan's coming for dinner tonight, and you know how much he drinks. And my kids would just look at me like, why is she talking to me like this? So anyway, I talked about this in my blog, and I talked about my paranoia about cashiers. And all these women from all over the world, and some men, there were always some men, would say, oh, wow, I'm really paranoid about cashiers too, and there was suddenly this feeling of, we're all in this together and we're not alone. And then I remember I had this comment from one woman who said, I am a cashier and I do judge you.
Of course she does. Of course they do. So good.
I think that was why. It wasn't because I was saying anything that was particularly wise or different, or actually quite the reverse. It was just I was talking about the ordinary stuff that ordinary people deal with when we find ourselves in this situation, which is not our fault, and we are not alone, and it is the fault of the addictive drug and not us. I tried to create a space that was completely non-judgmental.
Do you feel as if had you got sober in 2025 instead of 2015, you still would have felt the need to write under a pseudonym? Was there that stigma and that sort of shame that if you got sober, it meant you must have been really bad? Do you feel that has moved on, or do you feel like you still would have sort of hidden behind having the safety of writing under a pseudonym?
It's interesting. I was about to say, absolutely, things have changed, and I wouldn't have felt the need to use a pseudonym, because things are very different. And I don't think people feel that same shame. I think there is much more pride now in quitting drinking. However, I think it's still true that for the individual at the time, it still feels really shameful. So although I know that the world is very different and that there isn't the same societal shame that there used to be, there's still some, but not as much as there used to be. I suspect that when people first make the decision to give up, they still feel that shame to an extent. Partly because if you're a big drinker, you probably surround yourself by other big drinkers who are probably not going to be as understanding about the decision you're making as you would want them to be. And also because you have spent so long tricking yourself into believing that alcohol is your friend and that there is nothing wrong with it, that then not being able to deal with it feels like you failed somehow. So I like to think that I wouldn't feel the need to hide who I was, but I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe I still would have done, at least to start off with.
So many people that get sober describe having this identity crisis, and that the label of sober doesn't really sit well with them. I know you write about the fact that you were rebellious and you love to host, and you're like, can I still be rebellious and love to host if I'm sober? Because it feels like those things are complete opposites. So how did you overcome that identity shift? Or how long did that process take?
It did take quite a long time. And I was really worried. I was really worried about my husband, because I thought, God, he married a party girl. You know, he married this sort of the girl who would dance on the table and sort of, you know, and do karaoke even when nobody else was doing karaoke. And, you know, and I thought, God, you know, he didn't buy into this. He didn't buy into the sober wife. But, you know, I'm lucky in that he doesn't have an issue with alcohol. And as a result, he didn't care about me not drinking in the way that, I mean, if he'd stopped drinking when I was still drinking, I would have been utterly mortified. I would have been so angry with him. I'd like, you asshole, what do you think you're doing? So I was really lucky in that respect. I think the real change came for me when I realized that although when I was drinking, I thought that I was being the rebel and that was what rebels did, I realized that actually the really rebellious thing, the really cool thing, the really tough thing is to go through life without that prop, without drinking. You know, that was a really interesting mind shift for me. And I also realized I started watching people my age who were drinking, and it also made me realize that if you're drinking way too much at that age, or indeed at any age, it doesn't look cool. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't make you interesting or funny. It actually, you know, it makes you quite boring. You know, I used to go to parties and I would go to a party armed with about 2 or 3 different anecdotes, and I would flit around the party talking to each person for about 5 minutes, relaying what I thought was my amusing anecdote, sort of on repeat, and then I would leave. And you know, I didn't ever really have a proper conversation with somebody. I didn't, or if I did, I couldn't remember it the next morning in any detail. You know, whereas now I'll go to a party and I will sit and chat to somebody for a good length of time, and I will discover what's going on in their lives, and we will talk about stuff that's really important and really life enhancing, and I will remember it the next day, and I'll send them a message and say, I really enjoyed our conversation, or I've been thinking about you and I hope that, you know, this gets better, or whatever it is. And that actually is what makes you a good host, not the fact that you are drinking way too much and taking your clothes off on the kitchen table. You know?
Which can still happen when you're sober. We're not here telling you to keep your clothes on the kitchen table just because you're sober.
Yeah, if you want to, that's fine. But you know, I think my days of shedding clothes while standing on the kitchen table are probably behind me.
There's another misconception within sobriety, much like the books that you read when you first got sober, which is that you get sober, you know, that's the big challenge, and then after that you live happily ever after and nothing ever goes wrong and there's no stresses and, you know, it's just life is rainbows from then on. That was not the case for you. 8 months after you got sober, you were diagnosed with breast cancer. How do you think you would have coped with that news had you still been drinking at the time?
Oh God, you know, I'm so grateful even today that I wasn't drinking at that point, or during the pandemic, actually, for the same reason, because I was just about able to keep my life on track with the amount I was drinking when everything was going okay. But the minute something really big happens, you suddenly ramp everything up. And I would have gone from drinking 10 bottles of wine a week to probably what you accused me of at the beginning, which is 10 bottles of wine a day. all the wheels would have come off. I would have cried in front of the children. I would have been a complete mess. And apart from anything else, alcohol, what I didn't realize at the time, amazingly, and I think loads of women still don't realize now, is the massive link between alcohol and breast cancer, and especially hormonally driven breast cancer. Alcohol is really bad for breast cancer. So if I'd still been drinking while I was having treatment for breast cancer, it would have made my chances of proper recovery much lower and my chances of recurrence much higher. So I'm really, really grateful that I wasn't drinking at that point. And the other thing is that I discovered that all those things that we learn when we stop drinking are so helpful whenever there's any crisis in your life. So if you think back to the early days of not drinking, when you do the taking it one day at a time or 1 hour at a time even, and distracting yourself and treating yourself and all of those sort of, relaxation techniques, all the things you use when you're quitting drinking are really helpful when there's any crisis in your life. So as soon as this happened, I found myself doing the same things that I did when I was quitting drinking. And I felt like I had this toolkit at my disposal that I just wouldn't have had 8 months previously. I wouldn't have known what to do apart from just to drink. Yeah, so I do tell people who are struggling in the early days, I know this is hard, but what you are learning now will help you for the rest of your life. Anytime you feel like things are going tits up, you can use what you're learning now. So it is not wasted. It's not, it's hard, but it is invaluable.
And 8 months is a funny time to get that sort of news, because at 8 months, you're just rebuilding your confidence. You're like, you know what, I've pretty much got this. You're now looking forward to that 1 year, but it's still fairly early. And I've heard you speak about how really the best part of sobriety, most of those wins come in the second year, not the first. The first is sort of trying everything out for the first time. Were there any moments during the treatment of that and telling your husband and telling your kids where the idea of drinking ever popped into your head? Were there ever those really dark moments you thought, fuck all this?
Oh, yeah, all the time, especially because all the medical professionals would say, so I go and see my oncologist and he would say, so we're just investigating whether or not you need chemotherapy and blah, 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 blah. And then he'd say, now, why don't you go home and pour yourself a stiff gin and tonic? And I think, so, I was constantly being told to drink by nurses and doctors and all those, I just really wanted somebody to say, by the way, how much do you drink? So I could say, I don't drink. And nobody ever asked me, which is crazy because it's actually an important piece of information. So, yeah, I did think about it all the time. But by then, I knew that it would only make things harder. If I'd been diagnosed maybe 3 months previously, 6 months previously, I don't think I could have got through it without drinking because I wasn't as certain that not drinking was better for me than drinking in that situation. But it didn't mean I didn't think about it. I take the dog for a walk into the local park and I would just howl because I couldn't cry at home because the kids then would have got freaked out. So I would go to the park and howl like a mad woman and then come back home and think, okay, onwards and upwards.
Wow.
So
did you ever blame your drinking for the cancer? There is that link.
Yeah.
Did you ever look at it that way?
Yeah, I still
really,
do. Yeah. I still do. And, I had hormonally driven cancer and it was lobular breast cancer. So anyone who's had breast cancer will understand there are sort of so many different varieties of diagnosis, but both of those things are linked to alcohol. So if you drink, it raises your estrogen levels. And my breast cancer was incredibly strongly linked to estrogen. So that, for a start, was not a good thing. And lobular breast cancer is relatively rare. I think only about 10% of breast cancers are lobular rather than ductal. And lobular breast cancer is also more strongly linked to alcohol than ductal breast cancer. So for those reasons, I sort of, I strongly suspect that there was a link with the amount I was drinking. Also, I got breast cancer really young. I was only 46. And it's unusual to get breast cancer at that age, unless you have the BRCA gene like Angela Jolie. It's quite unusual. So yeah, I do suspect that it had something to do with it.
I think there's a number of reasons anyone would have clicked on today's episode. It might be they've read your book. It might be they're looking for similarities between your stories and they're trying to get sober and they're trying to look for inspiration. But I know that a lot of our listeners are particularly mums, we obviously have dads as well, but plenty of mums who are worried about how to speak to their children about alcohol because they go, what on earth can I do? They know I was an overdrinker. They know I'm now sober. Like, what foot have I got to stand on when teaching them the rules and regulations about not drinking or drinking responsibly? And I've heard you really succinctly simplify this into 3 rules, which if they stick to, things will be okay. And I've never heard anyone put it in that way. And you know, everyone sort of farts around this conversation. We don't really know how to do it. And, you know, yes, you can drink only if you're at home with me and I can be there to, you know, there's all these rules that we put in that's sort of a bollocks. But your rules work as far as I can tell. Can you tell us those rules?
Sure. As far as I was concerned, I thought it was important not to tell kids not to drink, because we all did. They will. If you tell them not to drink, they'll just drink and not tell you. You know, it's sort of, they may decide not to drink by themselves, but you can't tell teenagers what to do and what not to do. What you can do is show them a good example. And not drinking myself, I think, is hopefully a really good example that you can get through life as a grown-up without that sort of prop. So I think that's the best thing you can do. But the conversation I have with my kids and with any teenager who asks me is that the problem with alcohol is that it can sneak up on you. Because it's addictive, it can sneak up on you really gradually and without you even realizing. And the way that you drink now might be absolutely fine and absolutely sort of normal and, you know, all part of sort of, you know, having an active social life. But there may come a point when it isn't. And it is really important to set yourself some parameters so you don't get to that point if you want to be able to carry on drinking sensibly for the rest of your life and not have to give up totally like me. And the 3 rules I give them are, firstly, don't drink alone. Secondly, don't drink more than 3 days a week. And thirdly, don't drink more than 3 drinks in one sitting. And I say to them, does that seem really reasonable? And on the whole, you know, they will go, yeah, absolutely, that seems totally reasonable. And I say, okay, remember this conversation. Remember the time when you thought those rules were really, really reasonable. And I say, do you understand that if you find it impossible to stick to those rules, that you might have a problem? They go, yeah, I totally get that. You know, if I couldn't stick to those rules, that would be an issue. And I said, well, remember that too, because there will come a time, possibly in 10 years, where you, like me, you convince yourself that drinking alone is perfectly normal. When you convince yourself that as long as you have 1 night off a week, that's okay. And when you convince yourself that 3 drinks is actually 3 bottles. And you need to look back and think, there was a time when I knew that would be bad. And there was a time when I knew that not being able to stick to those rules was an issue. And that will be a really helpful conversation to remember. You know, even better, write it down, sign it, make yourself a contract. Yeah, so that's what I tell kids.
Oh, I love it. I think that's such a lovely place to end, Claire. I just want to say an enormous thank you. I cannot tell you how many people reach out to us and tell us that your book and our podcast is what got them sober. And it has been such a thrill to get you on so we can finally combine these 2 worlds. The whole way through your book, I was in awe of how similar your story is to Vic's, who I do the podcast with. 3 kids, husband called John. Her blog name was Drunk Mummy, Sober Mummy. Yours was Sober Mummy. And then you both turned your blogs into books and sort of revealed your true identities and got sober. So I don't want anyone listening to think you have to have 3 kids and a dog and a husband called John to do this. We're here for everyone. But I just want to say, you know, on behalf of Vic and I and all our listeners, thank you so much for writing the books that you have, obviously not just the Sober Diaries, and for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed chatting, and thank you for everything that you do, because I just wish I'd had something like this when I first quit drinking. You know, there's that voice of a friend in your ear who can say, you are okay and you are not alone and you will get through this. And, you know, I can understand why people love your podcast, because it's so valuable. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we would have accompanied you on the dog walks. Most people listen to us on the dog walks. So instead of screaming at your dog, you could have screamed at us.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you're questioning your relationship with booze, you're struggling to moderate, or your hangovers are causing anxiety, it might be time to reach out for some support.
Yeah, just talk to a mate about how you're feeling, contact a local doctor, find an AA or sobriety group. Vic's got one.
Yeah, just head to www.cuppa.community.
Remember, if you're questioning yourself, it might be time to seek support.
Even though this journey can be awkward, it is definitely worth it. And if you've enjoyed the Sober Awkward podcast, don't forget to review it, rate it, and share it with your mates.
Do they have to share it with their mates?
Yeah, of course they do. I'm not doing this for nothing, Hamish. Bloody hell.
How do they share it?
I don't know, just write it on the...
Vic, so do you fancy coming on a sober holiday?
Don't worry, we're not talking about some corporate wellness retreat with cucumber water and enforced eye contact.
No, this is a Sober Awkward retreat. 8 days of sun, sweat, laughter, and absolutely no hangovers.
Yep, it's all happening in Thailand next October. Picture this: yoga at sunrise, writing workshops, ice baths, Thai boxing, and lots of awkward sober dancing under the stars.
It's a proper holiday with proper weirdos. Our kind of people.
Yeah. You'll meet legends who've also given the booze a boot and want to have fun without feeling like a social reject.
Come solo or grab a mate. Bring your awkward, bring your sun cream. No pressure, no judgment, just a big, warm, sober hug in paradise.
All the info is at soberawkward.com/retreats. Come and get sweaty with us, emotionally and physically, in our all-inclusive jungle resort. You'll start out as 15 strangers and leave with 15 new sober mates.
I'm not sure I want 15 new sober mates, actually, particularly sober ones.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're not invited then.
So good, so good, so good.
Score holiday gifts everyone wants for way less at your Nordstrom Rack store. Save on UGG, Nike, Rag & Bone, Vince, Frame, Kurt Geiger London, and more.
Because there's always something new.
I'm giving all the gifts this year with that extra 5% off when I use my Nordstrom credit card. Santa who?
Join the Nordy Club at Nordstrom Rack to unlock our best deals. It's easy. Big gifts, big perks. That's why you rack. Busy work weeks can leave you feeling drained. Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet works at the cellular level to rejuvenate you from the inside out, providing real results that include fat-focused, sustainable weight loss with no injection needed. Next Gen builds on the original Prolon with 100% organic soups and teas, a richer taste, and ready-to-eat meals. Developed at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by top medical centers, Prolon supports biological age reduction, metabolic health, skin appearance, fat loss, and energy. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/start. That's prolonlife.com/start.
So, as you probably know, my comedy memoir, 1,000 Wasted Sundays, is officially out. All my magnificent fuck-uppery in one awkward hit. If you'd like to get your hands on a copy, it's now available from all good bookstores.
We always say all good bookstores, don't we?
Yeah.
Are there bad
No,
bookstores?
it's probably ones with moody sellers.
Oh yeah, really
Yeah.
depressed librarian folk.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. So there are probably some, but we're only storing it in the good ones.
It's only made it into the goodies.
You can also get it from all good online retailers. The print version and ebook are out now, and the audiobook will be available in March. I've been writing my memoir for 5 years. It will make you laugh, cry and cringe, and hopefully inspire a few people to reconsider their relationship with booze. If you love the podcast, then I think you'll love the book, even if I do say so myself. Hamish has read it. What did you think?
I feel like I know a little bit too much about you now, to be honest, Vic. Look, I really loved it. It was hilarious and surprisingly moving, but I feel like I've seen you naked in a literary sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's worrying.
Yeah. From an emotional point of view, seriously, it wobbled my teeny weeny wooden heart, Vic.
Okay.
My teeny little wooden heart.
Well, his wooden heart is broken. Anyway, so if you do manage to get your filthy mitts on a copy, please do me a favour and head to goodreads.com and give me a review. Doing that will help me get it out there to those that need a bit of sober support. So there you have it. My story, unwanted warts and all. Come and get awkward with me.
Not to be too demanding or anything, but seriously, go and buy it now.
Yeah, go and buy it. Go and buy it right now.
Yeah, don't just tell your friends, buy it, and then buy your friends one or two.
Yeah, don't give them a copy, buy it. Yeah.
And you know what? Don't be careful where you store it. If you lose it, you can always buy another 5.
Buy another one.
Yeah.